Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 5 of our 6-part Iconic Masters full set review. Today we're going to look at all the green cards. We're also going to finish up the multicolor cards as well, leaving just one more chapter. That's going to be the colorless cards. Now, if you've been watching the series all along, you kind of know what to expect here. We're going to look at each card individually and talk about what archetypes and drafts and what you need to know about it too for sealed to get you ready for some limited play maybe this coming weekend. Since all these cards are reprints, we kind of already know what they do in constructed, so this is really going to be a limited review of the cards. Quickly before we get started though, if you check out the description below, you're going to find a few ways to help support us and what we do here. You'll find our Patreon page linked down there. You'll also find some products on Amazon. If you make any purchases via that link, we'll get a small percentage. And finally, Flipside Gaming, they have a promo code for our viewers, and they're doing pre-orders right now for Iconic Masters, the dual decks, a whole bunch of stuff that's coming up. So check that out. Hopefully save yourself some money. All right, with that being said, let's get into it because we got a lot of cards to look at. We're going to start off with Ariel Predation. Okay, now this is a card I would typically say I'm going to keep in my sideboard, bring it in if I know I'm up against some flyers. There are some really good flyers in this set, so a lot of the time you will be using this. Maybe it's even okay to main deck this. The other thing that makes me say, okay, maybe I main deck it is because of the life gain piece. We have seen in previous videos that Orzhov, black and white, do have a life gain matters theme going on. Maybe I just splash this into a true Orzhov deck, or I just play off the synergies that I get in a Selesnya deck or inside a Golgari deck. So the card becomes just a little bit better in those situations. Assault Formation. This is a good one, and this is one of those key uncommons you want to pay attention to because it does interact with a lot of cards and actually kind of builds an archetype. There is a Defender's Matter thing going on. It's mostly in Simek. It crosses over a little bit into red, though, so keep that in mind when you're building your deck. Now, what this is going to do for you in a very cheap way for just 2 mana is going to allow your creatures to do damage based on toughness. That becomes very relevant if you have high toughness creatures, which include, of course, these defender creatures. Also, too, if you pay a green, then the defender can attack. That's kind of nice. And also, too, there's a pump ability attached here. This card's doing a ton of stuff, right? Now, you want the mana to pump into it, but you're in the right color because green is going to give you a lot of opportunity for some ramp and some extra mana, too. So ultimately, yeah, this card is actually a build around me card in this particular set, which is pretty sweet. Carven Caryatid. This is one of those defenders, actually 2/5, high toughness, and also it replaces itself. There's a lot happening here for 3 mana. So again, for that Simek Defender Matters build, wonderful. You're going to love this card. But you might still play this outside of that build because it comes up the ground really nicely and it replaces itself. Channel. Okay, here's our first mythic of the day. And I talked about this when we were talking about red because of its combo with Fireball. Maybe you've heard of that, Channel Fireball. It's a little combo that is quite good. So even if you're not playing with Fireball, though, this is still a really good card. There's a lot of stuff you can do with the mana. Taking life, converting into mana is a very, very powerful ability, basically letting you break the mana curve and hopefully break the game if you can do that. Now, if you draw this late when you're behind, okay, it's not going to be great for you, but so many times, this is just going to be game winning. So if you happen to get it, yeah, look at the other cards you have and the synergies you have. Fireball would be awesome, but like I said, if you don't have it, it's still a really, really good card. Crowned Ceratok. This is a +1/+1 matters card, so it doesn't have a +1/+1 counter itself when it comes into play or anything, but it does affect other cards that do. 4/3 Trampler for 4 is just generally a good curve filler, first and foremost, but this card gets better in Selesnya, it gets better in Golgari, where there are going to be +1/+1 matters themes going on. But also, too, I mean, just in green itself, there's +1/+1 counter creation. So that alone could mean the card has extra benefit no matter what deck you're in. So keep that in mind. Cursive Predation. Okay, one of those cards that will now give you some +1/+1 counters. And that is incredibly, incredibly relevant in green. And again, like I said, even better for Golgari as well as Selesnya. Now, when we looked at the black cards a few days back, we saw a Golgari card, Corpse Jack Menace. Basically, when that's in play, anytime one of your creatures is going to get counters, it gets double that many counters instead. And imagine playing that with some of these other cards you're going to see today. Yeah, you could be in for a big, big payday, right? A lot of value to be had there. So this is just one of those cards that set it up. But even if you don't have that, it's just very solid for a +1/+1 matters theme. Darkwood Baloth. One of the things I like about green is it's all about efficiency, and it's not just talking about efficiency when it comes to ramping. That's part of it. Ramping is a big part of green and definitely crosses over well into green-red. But suspend is another part of that efficiency. And you also even see a real small landfall side game going on that plays well into some of the green cards and even one of the cards in white. So there's a lot of things going on in green that are about emphasizing efficiency. Suspend's just one of them. This is a great suspend card, right? Because you can play this, hopefully suspended on turn 1, if you're lucky. 5 turns later, you get this thing. It comes into play with haste. Remember that. Suspend creatures will enter the battlefield with haste if they were suspended. So it does change the combat math a little bit when you're trying to decide when and how to play this. So that's awesome. And it's just a big old beater. 5/5 for 6 even is still just fine. But you really want to hopefully suspend this, play this with haste, and then also play something else the same turn. That's where this really is going to excel. Duskdale Worm. Okay, here's a big old trample creature. Actually, quite affordable at 7, considering what you're getting here. 7/7 trample. And it's in a color of +1/+1 counters matters. So maybe this gets to be an 8/8, 9/9. Could be really good for you in the right build, but still a solid higher end creature just regardless. Enlarge. Okay. Maybe my favorite art of the set. I know it's not new art, but I love this art. I had to make the background because it's amazing. I mean, the giant cat's eating like the Merfolk City. I mean, you know, right? So I don't think I need to say more about that or why that's awesome. So anyway, Enlarge is just a fine card. Like, it has to be blocked if possible. So you do have to take that into account. And sometimes this feels more like a removal spell. But +7/+7 on something that is already big and giving a trample could be pretty backbreaking too. Maybe this isn't as good as Overrun is, but it's still a very good card to just push damage across. You could argue probably a little better in the Selesnya deck because that deck's about going tall. But again, you can use this a lot of places. Genesis Hydra. Okay, ramp decks, this is perfect, right? So you're thinking Gruul probably first and foremost. Not to say you can't work this in other places too, but if you have the extra mana to build up the X, this thing becomes bigger, number 1. But maybe more importantly, lets you dig deeper and get a bigger permanent out of the top of your library, and that's actually pretty sweet. So again, as long as you have the mana, this is going to be great for you, I think. If you're in a more conservative build, maybe skip it. Genesis Wave. In some ways, a lot better even than the last card we saw. It costs 1 more green. It doesn't give you the Hydra necessarily, but it does something a little bit different. This time when you play the card, you get to do a similar thing, looking at the top X cards, but you can put any number of permanents, X or less, onto the battlefield with this card, where the Genesis Hydra was a little more restrictive. You can only put a non-land permanent that met the requirements, and only one, of course. This time, you could potentially hit a whole bunch of cards, maybe, if you're lucky. Now, yeah, both these cards are a little high variance, sure, but you can mitigate that variance a little bit with ramp. If you can go deeper, go higher with the X, go into bigger things, then you can have a really large swing on your hands. So this is a really, really awesome card, especially in Gruul. Also important to notice, too, that the cards you don't take are put in the graveyard with Genesis Wave as opposed to being reshuffled into your library with the Hydra. So that is a difference. Sometimes they'll be relevant. Greater Basilisk. Death Touch creature, especially high toughness ones, I'm always on board for. This one costs 5, 3/5 Death Touch. It's actually really good. Good curved creature. Also 2 lures in the set that helps maybe make it even a little bit better some of the time. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Hero's Bane. Okay, here's another one of these Hydras. And again, this will be a good payoff for your mana if you're ramping. So again, better probably in the Gruul deck. But this one's decent. I mean, it doesn't have any kind of evasion. It does take a little more resources to really make this more formidable, but it's still very good. Hunt the Weak. All right, here's another card that plays into the +1/+1 theme, so that's really cool. But even aside from that, this is probably the best green removal you're going to find. So if you're in green, you're looking for removal, Hunt the Weak is the card you're going to be looking for. Hunting Pack. Here's a Storm card. There's a few Storm cards just kind of scattered through this set, which I think is kind of funny. And this set's not about storming out or anything, but it's about finding some efficiencies, and this is a card where you maybe can find some efficiencies. It's an instant, sure it costs 7, so it's a little expensive, but if you can get even 2 tokens out of this, it's probably worth paying the 7 for. 2 4/4s would be pretty good, 3's even better, right? Sometimes that'll work out. I like the fact that it's an instant, you can take advantage of your opponent maybe having a big turn perhaps, and playing a couple things. So yeah, overall, just another fine creature. Helps you go wide too, which is nice for Golgari especially, but it's just good generally. Inspiring Call. Okay, this needs to be played with a +1/+1 theme, sure. But if you have that theme and you're confident in it, this is very runnable, helps you get through your deck. And it's also a nice combat trick too. Now, if you don't have that theme, then of course you skip this one. Ivy Elemental. Okay, this is an X-Spell, which can be very relevant, which we saw in the red chapter of the series, right? But yes, Gruul does have ramp attached to it, so it gets a little bit better there. Yeah, it doesn't have evasion, but it could still be a really good, dumb, big creature for you, and it could be just fine. If you can give it trample, like Enlarge or something, you're probably having a good day. Jotty Offshoot. Here's one of those defenders. So this works well in like the Simek Defender build, for example. And at the same time, also gains you a little bit of life and has some landfall. Now, landfall, like I said, is really limited in this particular set, but there are some payouts for it. We're going to see them as we go further into green. Worth mentioning, too, of course, that life gain also interacts well with some of the cards in black and white. Jugen the Rising Star. Okay, here's the last Kamigawa Dragon in that cycle that we'll be looking at. And, yeah, you know what? You don't see a lot of flying green creatures, so when you do see one, you do want to pay attention to it. They make you pay green, though. 3 green and 3 for it, so a little strict on color. But it's a 5/5 flyer. When it dies, you get to distribute 5+1/+1 counters among your creatures. So it kind of does everything green kind of wants to do, right? So maybe better even in Selesnya as well as Golgari for that reason. But at the same time, it's a dragon. There's also a Dragon Matters theme going on out there, and that's happening in red and black. So again, another reason this could be good in Golgari, and also a reason this could be good in Gruul too. So this does a good job of walking the line between a lot of different archetypes. Lead the Stampede. Okay, this is a good card as long as you have a fair amount of creatures in your deck, right? So if you're a little more spell, instant sorcery heavy, then maybe skip this one. But if you're creature heavy, you can play this and be pretty happy with it. Lotus Cobra, another landfall card, and it's also a ramp card. So keep that in mind. Also fixes your color, so it's good if you're trying to go a little bit deep. Great reprint, very welcome reprints, and just an excellent card just generally to play for 2. Lore, one of my favorite cards from the old days, from original Alpha Beta Unlimited. I play this when I can in Limited in sets that it exists because usually I'm pleasantly surprised by what it can do, right? Like even if I don't have a plan ahead of time, I'm like, wow, you know, I could play Lore here and maybe even win the game. It's that good. It's just a unique card. Like it works well with Death Touch, sure, but also too, maybe if I go wide like in a Golgari build, I just put this on my weaker creature and my opponent's forced to block that one creature, everything else gets by. It just can do a lot of stuff for you. Nantuko Shaman. This is a good suspend card, and you kind of want to suspend this one because if you do, it replaces itself. Now, if you don't, you just pay the 3. The suspend actually costs 1 more, which is a little odd, but if you pay the 3, then you just get a 3/2, and that's fine if you're backed against the wall. But what you want to do is just suspend this and just get the extra value of hopefully playing this, replacing it, attacking in with haste, having a pretty good day. Nature's Claim, sideboard card basically. I'm not going to start off with this, but if my opponent has a problematic artifact or enchantment, I'll play it. Yes, it gains some life, maybe a little awkward, especially if they're an Orzhov, but it kind of is what it is if you need it. Netcaster Spider. This is a 2/3 reach for 3, but when it blocks something with flying, it gets +2/+0. So a nice little blocker against flying. This can actually deal with some big flyers. I mean, this can block as a 4/3 against the flyer and throw a +1/+1 counter or 2 on it. You got yourself a pretty nice force to stop things like dragons even. So this is a real nice common to pick up. Obstinate Baloth. Okay, this is a 4/4 for 4. So just on paper, it's a good creature, and you gain 4 life, and that's kind of nice. Even better with some of the synergies you may find in Selesnya or in Golgari. But aside from that, yes, there are some discard spells out there your opponents could throw at you. They're in black, and if they happen to do that, well, you got some bonus out of this card. Overgrown Battlement. Fantastic ramp card here. And this, again, covers some bases. Great ramp card for Gruul. It's a defender, high toughness, which is kind of nice, too, if you have some synergy with the card we saw earlier. But also, too, like Simek Defender Matters things. But you know what? At the end of the day, this is just an awesome card. Nice little blocker that lets you ramp. You'll be really happy to play this anytime. Phantom Tiger. I like these kind of cards where they do the +1/+1 counter thing and then prevent the damage, remove the counter, and all that. Like, I think that's an interesting concept. It's very good, in particular, if you can add +1/+1 counters, and you're in the right color to do that, right? And on top of that, the other abilities they can grant. So there's so much synergy with +1/+1 counters here, definitely not only just within green itself, but when you start looking at the Golgari colors, you start looking at the Selesnya colors. So this card is very good in those decks, but again, it's just a good 3-drop just generally, I think. Praise Vengeance. Rebound card. So we've seen a lot of these. They're especially good with prowess creatures, so this is going to work well perhaps in Gruul as well as Simek. But again, it's a good combat trick even outside of those places. Prime Evil Titan. Wow, this is a mythic for sure. I'll tell you, this card's amazing. So if you get this, play it. I'm not going to sit around and say, hey, only play it in this archetype, because that's not the case. You're going to want to play this card because it's awesome. Now, certain archetypes, it is better. So let's talk about that real quick. First off, you're in a situation where you want to bolster out your lands and enhance maybe some of your landfall. This is one of the few ways to do it. We're going to see a couple more in just a second. This is the few ways to actually make an impact and really exploit landfall. Secondly, maybe you just need to ramp. That's something that green and red's definitely interested in. Or maybe you just need to color fix and you just need to pull some particular land out of your deck to do that. So it does all this stuff for you. And, oh yeah, it's a 6/6 trample creature too on top of it. Card is phenomenal. So, like I said, if you get it and you're in green, you're going to play this thing. Rampaging Ballots. Here's a landfall card, and it's actually a pretty good one. This one is also a 6/6 trample for 6. That alone is actually pretty decent for limited purposes. But yes, again, with landfall creating 4/4 beast tokens, that's not a bad thing either. Search for Tomorrow. Here's another way to actually get an additional land into play and exploit landfall. So like I said, there's not a lot of ways, but there's a few, and it becomes relevant at least some of the time anyway. Now, this one also has Suspend, so that's kind of nice as well. And again, this is going to help you ramp, help you color fix. It's generally a good card. Sultai Flare. This is a 3/4 for 4, so good curve card. But when a creature you control dies toughness 4 or greater, you get to gain 4 life. So again, it's trying to play into some of those white-green, black-green, life matters situations. And who knows, maybe you do basically a true Orzhov deck and even splash just a tad bit of green for some of these cards too, and you might find some synergy there. Timberland Guide. This is a good 2-drop, like just generally a good 2-drop. It can be a 2/2, so it's basically like a Grizzly Bear, or you can move that +1/+1 counter to something else. And again, with the +1/+1 counter synergy, this becomes that much better. So very good card. It's going to be, again, maybe a little better in Golgari Selesnya, but at the same time, just a solid card. Undercity Troll. Hey, it's renowned, so guess what that means? A possibility at a, you guessed it, +1/+1 counter. So again, that's going to be very relevant in a couple different decks. But again, even beyond that, 2-drop 2/2, which gives me the option to not only renown one, but also to regenerate. There's a lot going on here. This is a very, very solid 2-drop. All right, Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. This is actually the last mythic we'll be looking at. And it's a good one. I mean, it's a little expensive at 8, but you're in green. That's the right color for expensive stuff. 7/6 trample, and it gives you a mana flare if you still want to cast more stuff. I mean, at some point, you're kind of like, I just cast this for 8. How much more mana do I need? But maybe you have a fireball or something. Who knows? And on top of that, your opponent's lands basically get frozen down when they tap. So, yeah, this is a beater. Like, your opponent needs to solve this problem super quick, or they're in a lot of trouble and the game's basically over. So, this is the last Praetor of the Praetor series. And yeah, it's a good one. It doesn't disappoint, that's for sure. Wall of Roots, I love this card. Another great defender, 0/5 power toughness, and it also attributes to the ramp of your deck. So, yes, great ramp card, great blocker, works with Simek Defender, works with Gruul Ramp, but it's still just good anywhere. Wild Size, great combat trick. 3 casting cost +2/+2, and more importantly, trample. That's going to be huge, especially for Selesnya, where a lot of times you're going big. Golgari is also doing some things with +1/+1 counters, obviously, but they feel a little more swarmy to me. They feel a little more like go wide, where Selesnya is truly going tall. So this is maybe better there, but still a good combat trick anywhere. Love the fact that it replaces itself. All right, let's move on to a few multicolored cards. Chronicler of Heroes for Selesnya. It's a fine +1/+1 matters card. Like, it's a 3/3, even if you don't have anything with a counter on it. And hey, if you do, it replaces itself. Wonderful. Good card for the 3 spot. Knight of the Reliquary. Okay, very powerful card in constructed Nightfall decks and such. Now, in this particular format, it still can be good, especially if you have some landfall. And we saw some landfall today in green. There's one card in white. So, yeah, there are things you can do with this, and also can lead to some color fixing and such. And in itself, it can grow over time. So, there's a lot happening here. I mean, it's not as efficient as in a constructed deck with like fetch lands and stuff like that, sure. But there are ways to exploit the power level of this card, even in the limited environment. All right, let's move on to Simic with Jungle Barrier. And of course, this fits into the Simek Defender theme. 2/6, so again, high toughness. And it replaces itself. It's really nice. Also has some decent power with too. It can actually stop some things, so that's actually pretty sweet. And finally, Simek Sky Swallower, just a powerful creature. 6/6 Flying Trample Shroud. It's going to cost you 7, 2 different colors, but you know what? That doesn't matter. It's just really good. You're going to work it into your deck. The Shroud, remember, is not hexproof, so you can't target it either. It's very, very important. You don't want to make that mistake. But overall, it's a hard creature for your opponent to deal with. They're going to need a couple flyers to like block this or group block it, or they're going to need to get a Lucky Edict effect off at the right time or something like that. All right, with that being said, those are all the green cards. So guess what? We only have one more chapter left to go. It's the colorless cards. So we're going to come back and look at the lands. We're going to look at the artifacts and the one colorless spell in the set. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe. Have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.